Welcome everybody to Tibbs Brewing downtown Kalamazoo. First of all, I want to just say thank you to Kevin and the Tibbs staff. Let's all thank them for this opening up the space for Overdue Brew. So my name is Kevin King. I work at the Kalamazoo Public Library. Very pleased to see everyone here. We are competing with Black Street and Houdini next door at the theater. So if we hear some hip hop, we can have a dance break if you want to. I know a lot of you look like former break dancers in the house. We'll get some. I think there's probably some cardboard boxes in the back. We can probably make something work. All right. So again, thank you for coming tonight. This is we're very excited to have Christopher here from Black Frog Brewing. Every year we sit around and Farrell and I and a couple other people brainstorm ideas for Overdue Brew. And this one, I heard an NPR story on Black Frog Brewing and Christopher, and I was super excited. And, you know, the internet's wonderful. You just look it up, and you send an email, and he said, of course I'll come. And it was really awesome to get that immediate response and to be excited to come to Kalamazoo because we are truly Beer City, not Grand Rapids. So. I mean, seriously, give me a break, Grand Rapids. I mean, no. All right, so today we're going to have kind of a Q&A format with Matt Smith, who also works at Kalamazoo Public Library, who is a brewer himself. He works at the library. He doesn't brew at the library, unfortunately, yet. We're hoping that's in the cards for later on.
What floor is that?
Exactly. At least you didn't ask me what the call numbers were, because I couldn't tell you. I'm sure you had. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and a couple other things. We've got some swag up here. If you didn't enter the raffle, please enter the raffle. There's the package is great. You get this really cool hat, right? You get a pint glass, and you get Good Night Brew, not Good Night Moon, Good Night Brew, the book. Because we have to make somehow book related. We couldn't just say we want to do a beer thing. We have to say there's going to be a book somewhere in there. And so this legally, makes it a library event, having the book. Okay. So, all right. Thank you very much. And there's some swag. If you didn't get some of the swag, there's koozies and these really cool bottle openers. And one more thing, we have, if you didn't know, we host a reading together every year program. The whole community reads the same book. This year, the book is The Hate You Give. It's an amazing novel. I highly recommend you read it. And then Angie Thomas, the author, will be here on April 17th. So there's bookmark reminders of that up here as well. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Matt, and we will start. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Really excited to be here with y'all. Excited to be here with Chris Harris, the founder and the owner and the brewer of Black Frog Brewing Company in Toledo, Ohio. Black Frog has this really unique, compelling origin story. So I really want you, Chris, if you could just go over how Black Frog Brewery started, from literally starting in a garage to where Black Frog is now as a tap room, and kind of talk about the memories that really stand out from that transition and how that evolution went, if you would.
Well, good evening, everybody. So how Black Frog started was me as a typical home brewer, brewing at home. Started on a Little Mr. Beer kit, and from there I was really hooked. After I brewed that first beer on that Mr. Beer kit and waited my 2-3 weeks after for it to bottle condition and tasted it, I was like, wow, I made beer. So I was kind of hooked from there. And so it really became a passion for me because I wanted to brew all the time. I don't know if anybody out there is any brewers, but you probably know what I'm talking about. It's like you get that bug and it's just something that you love to do. So I went through different stages of my brewing. I went from brewing on the Mr. Beer kit to brewing extract kits to brewing all grain. And when I started I did a lot of research. I was reading a lot. And so again, when I was on the Mr. Beer Kid, you would read about all grain and you thinking like, what is all grain? What are they talking about? And it was just the whole process of learning. So once I finally graduated to all grain, got me some coolers, got me a better pot. So every Sunday morning I was in the kitchen, I was crushing grains, and putting them in my mash tun and after there getting ready for my boil. So it was just, hopefully I didn't drive my family crazy. They were all in their room and I got the house smelling like hops and, I'm just,
Not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
yeah, I'm brewing every Sunday. And as I progress, you know, I'm giving beer away to friends at work, and getting feedback. And then you're getting that bug. It's like, you know, I wonder if I can do this professionally. And of course, there's always challenges to determine, you know, is the beer good enough? You know, are you going to be able to sell beer? You know, just because I like it and my friends like it, is a wider audience going to like it? So I decided to try and kind of take that step. I did a lot of research, a lot of research online. I looked at a lot of breweries, and there's really two breweries in particular that I looked at that had started breweries in garage, and I kind of modeled myself after those, and seek mentorship, and I was just trying to get prepared to try and open a business. And so for there, once I decided, you know, okay, it's time to pull the trigger, I decided I wanted to get into the brewing industry, but I didn't want to take on a lot of debt. So decided that we're gonna kind of self-finance it. So what I did, took some money out my 401k, decided to take about a third of my garage and parcel it off, and make my small brewery there. So each state is different as far as licensing, but every brewery goes through the federal government. But each state have their own rules. So I applied through the federal government, and that went fairly smoothly. I ran into some hiccups with the state of Ohio as far as getting licensing, but I was able to overcome those hiccups. There was some special requirements I needed to meet. I met them, and they approved me to run a brewery out of the garage. So from that point, it was time to start making beer. And so the first two beers that I started with was a cream ale, and the reason I started with a cream ale is, and everybody looks to be about my age or maybe a little bit older. I used to love drinking Little Kings when I was young. I used to love drinking Little Kings. So a cream ale was really near and dear to my heart. So I decided to do a cream ale, and then I also did an IPA. And what's special about the IPA? So Toledo has the 180th Tactical Fighter Wing, which my father spent 35 years out at the Air National Guard out there. And so my IPA is dedicated to my father in the 180th, which I call Flying Frog. So it's dedicated to the 180th Tactical Fighter Group. So those are the two beers that I started with. And so once I got them down, I brewed the beers, and I kind of took a different route than most breweries probably starting. I started with packaging instead of trying to get my beer on tap. It was just, for me at the time, it was just easier for me to deal with packaging and try and get it in the stores. And at the point, it really worked out to my favor.
And by packaging, you're talking about bottling, right?
Yes, bottling.
Putting beer in bottles.
Yes,
Cool.
putting beer in bottles.
Yep.
And so there is a local store called, or they're not in business any longer, but there was a local store called the Andersons. And they were really known for their beer and wine selection there. And so before I approached the Anderson, our local paper had did a piece on me that was in the city paper. And so when I went to the Anderson, of course I'm nervous because, you know, I don't know how to approach anybody to sell my beer. And so I'm going to the guy at the Anderson, and I'm Chris Harris from Black Frog Brewery. Would you be interested in, purchasing beer from me? And so the first thing he tells me is that, what took you so long to get here? And so he told me, bring some beer back. I'll have everybody here taste it. If everybody likes the beer, we'll put the beer on tap. A couple weeks later, I take about 10 cases there. Everybody tries it. I get thumbs up. And they put the beer on the shelf, and literally in a day, they sell out all my beer. And I'm getting calls, hey, we sold out all the beer. We need more beer. And so from that point on, it's like, okay, I need to ramp up this production and make more beer to start distributing more. So from there, it's like sales were really good. Every time I would take beer to the Anderson, they were constantly selling out. I did that for 2 years, and at that point it was time for me to decide, okay, it's time to get some type of a location where people can come and drink the beer on location. Looked around town trying to find the perfect location. Finally found a perfect location close to our home. And then it was time again, and then I ran into some problems with the federal government to where I needed to transfer my license from my home to the new location, and literally this was just a change of address. So I submitted all the paperwork to change location. 8 months later, nothing has been done.
Wow.
And so I ended up contacting my congressperson saying, hey, I'm a small business owner. I'm losing money. It's like I can't afford to keep paying rent for some place that I'm not using. Literally within a week, I get a call from the TTB saying, hey, we're processing your application. Literally days later, the address change is done, and I'm in business at the new location. Opening night was September 16th of 2016, and it was open to a wide success of people, and we've been selling beer at the new location since then.
Nice. Were there people from the beginning that were like early supporters of you that shared your vision, or early dissenters from the very beginning? And were there special people during the process, like, when you switched over from the garage to the tap, like, were there specific people that helped you through this process that come to mind?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank my beautiful wife back there. She's always had my back. Thank you so much, dear. Really, it was just us. Again, I was dealing with some mentors. There's an organization called SCORE that provide mentorship. And so I was dealing with them, and they were helping me, and mentoring me, and guiding me into the right direction. But other than that, no, there was the community as a whole supported me. They didn't know who I was, but they still supported who I was and the goal that I had in mind. So I guess there really wasn't any negative towards me at all.
Impressive. So there's this funny meme I came across once online. It kind of tracks the evolution of like people's beer palates from like cheap light lagers, Bud Light, Miller Lite, which I'm pretty sure you started with those, like all of the rest of us. And then you get to the super hoppy IPAs, and then you get to the really high alcohol like imperial stouts, and then you really get fancy with the sours. Like you're something if you drink sours. And then it comes all back around to like lagers again, but this time like craft lagers. Mm-hmm. Like I noticed you had like a Kolsch tab. You're talking about cream ales. Talk about the evolution of your beer palate just as a person, and maybe how that reflects in Black Frog Brewery as well.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I did drink Little Kings when I was young. But thinking about I drank a lot of garbage beers. So when I was young, and probably before I was supposed to be drinking, I did drink a lot of garbage beers. I drank Old English, Little Kings, Mickey Big Mouths. But of course, this is before I knew any better, and before really craft had really taken off. Mm-hmm. And then as I probably got a little bit older in my early 20s or whatever, I was drinking Heineken, and I thought that, hey, I didn't really made it. I'm drinking something. I thought I was drinking something really good. I thought I was drinking something really good. But I think the first beer that really, really introduced me to craft, and is probably one of my top beers, is Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale. That really changed my life. It was like, wow, this is a great beer. And from there, it's like it just opened up my palate. And then after you drink what beer is supposed to taste like, and you go back and you try and drink something else, it's like something's the matter here.
Yep, the matter.
And so that really involved my palate. And along with the cream ale, it's like I have fond memories of Little Kings. And so when I made the cream ale, I was like, okay, I know I can improve on this. I can make a cream ale that is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And it happens to be one of our top sellers. So I'm more than positive that's what happened. And another philosophy that I have with beer is when I was going through my mentorship, my mentor gave me a magazine, and in the magazine it was a brewery that I want to say they were in Wisconsin, and they were getting ready to go out of business. And what they were trying to do was they were making beer that they thought the public would like, or they were trying to please the public, but they really weren't successful at making those beers. And so they were like 6 months away from closing their doors. And so what they decided to do was they were going to make beers that they enjoyed making. And when they started making those beers, things turned around for that brewery, to where they went from getting ready to close their doors to adding on to it an expansion or whatever. And so when I read that, I kind of took that to heart. And that was, and it is one of my philosophies in my brewing, is that I refuse to brew a beer that I do not like drinking. I'm not going to brew a beer to try and please someone else. If I don't like the beer, I'm not going to make it. So I only make the beers that I like to drink, and which I found to be really successful for me, because a lot of people, I guess, have the same palate that I have. Mm-hmm. So I will not make anything that I do not like to drink.
Nice. Sweet. That was my next question. Is that true for you, Kevin?
few that I'll drink them all, but some of our best sellers are not my favorites.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Pleasing the public.
And that's okay.
I'm selling out.
That's okay.
I guess.
Yeah, that's
They're
good.
selling out. So there's this idea, and sorry, I should have said we're gonna have questions from the audience. Yeah. So there's this idea people have, and like young brewers probably have, that brewing is like about like you're actually brewing a lot of the time. When is it not the case at all? I think Kevin once said it was, quote, a glorified janitor, right? But so you own a brewery, you're the founder, and you brew as well. But what's it like to do like way more of the business stuff than the actual thing you seem to love the most, which is brewing? What's that like?
I hate it.
Yeah.
I guess as Kevin can probably attest, that's really not the fun side of brewing. I tell people that come into the tap room all the time that if all I had to do was brew beer every day, I would be happy. But there is so much more to running a business or running a brewery than just brewing beer. So you have to take that with it. I mean, it's all part of the business.
Mm-hmm. So February is Black History Month, so we're celebrating Black History Month this month. And you've spoken many times about being a black brewery owner and a black brewer in the past. But you've also sometimes gotten a little annoyed by that question because it comes over and over and over again, probably by white people, maybe that look like me, every single time. So before we get into that, because that brings up this issue of tokenism, of seeing a black person only as a black person, not as a brewer, not as a business owner, not as a vet.
Right.
You know, you have multiple identities, and black people have the right to have multiple identities and not just that one identity. How has that been like, the annoying side of that, and this issue of like constantly have to speak for all black people all the time just because you're a black brewer? Talk about that a little.
I don't like to think that I speak for all black people.
Yeah.
But sometimes it does get annoying being asked that same question over and over again. What is it like being a black brewer? I'd like to think I'm just a brewer. I'm no different than Kevin. I mean, we're the same. I mean,
your story, honestly, when you were up there talking, it's like verbatim.
Exactly.
When I started with Mr. Beer Kit, I got
So it's the
hooked that
same.
way. I went from Mr. Beer to extract to partial mash to ball grain.
it's just my skin tone is a little bit different than his.
Right. Yep.
So, I would like to be judged on the quality of my beer.
Mm-hmm.
And not the color of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
But if my color of my skin allows me to speak in events like this to tell my story and for people to see a different side of me, then I think it's all well worth it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So it is true that the craft brewing industry is extremely white, and not just white, but extremely masculine. So white men. How is that? And it's not just that it's white men. It's like not only black brewers aren't represented,
Mm-hmm.
but all people of color aren't represented, right?
Right.
Latinx folks are not represented.
Right.
So I was at like a conference. No, I wasn't at the conference. I was at the Radisson once, and there was some big brewing conference going on. The number of white guys with beards that looked like me was like almost comical. But like when you think about it, it's not really comical. It's not that funny because this is a super profitable industry. We're talking about wealth building, living wages, good salaries. So from that vantage point, it is kind of depressing that the industry is so white. We're talking about groups of people getting cut out of this. So the question that people like to ask is why, right? Why is craft brew so white and so masculine? And I want your thoughts on that. A thought that I've noticed floating around is like that there's this cultural preference explanation, right? I don't know if you've heard of it, but like for some reason, black folks don't prefer craft beer or Latinx folks don't prefer. Do you buy that explanation, or do you think there's something else structural or maybe historical that's actually a barrier behind that? Or do you think it's both?
I don't believe it's historical. I do believe it's structural. I believe craft beer is targeted towards someone that looks like you. And maybe not someone that looks like me. So if I was to go into the inner city where I live at, I wouldn't see any representation of any type of craft beer at all there, because that's not their target market. If I was to go into that store, what I would see is craft beer, like I said, Old English, St. Ives, or Bud, or Michelob. The beer reps know that target market is probably not going to buy any type of craft beer. But I guess it's twofold, because even though that demographic may not buy that type of beer, it also has a financial point to it also, because in some urban cities where, let's say for instance, this beer right here is $7 a pint, to where somebody might get a Budweiser at the same store for $2 a pint. So if you're in an urban area and you're on a fixed income, are you going to pay $7 a pint, or are you going to pay $2 a pint? It has a lot of variables to it, but I believe that if the craft industry, I guess there's ways around it to where the craft industry could target that market. I guess an example is, oh my God, Solid Gold by Founders.
Oh yeah.
It's a great beer.
Affordable.
Yes, it's an affordable beer. It's
Great.
craft beer. It tastes great. So I mean, you could probably start with something like that in the craft beer in the urban area to introduce more people of color to craft beer, and then as you're introducing them, you can introduce more types of beers to them, and show the value of this beer over a Budweiser.
Sure.
So there's different ways that they can approach it. I guess it all depends on if they want to take those steps to approach it, to bring those different demographics into the fold and into craft beer. I think it could be done. They just need to take those steps.
Nice. I really appreciate that answer, because like a lot of times we talk about a group of people, in this case, people of color, not being included into any industry. Like the onus can go on the people, like the people that are represented. The onus is on you to break through and to,
Right.
And I like that your answer was actually kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
How can craft brew be inclusive, to folks? I think one more question, but it's about this festival called Fresh Fest. So it's a I think it's an annual festival.
Second year.
Second year. So just talk a little bit about that and what it means, what your experiences have been, because you've been to both of them, right?
Well, this will be the second year in
This will
August.
be the second coming up. And maybe some of the takeaways or things you've learned from Fresh Fest and stuff like that.
Okay, so this will be the second year for Fresh Festival. So, of course, the first year was last year in August. And so what Fresh Fest did was it brought together majority of African-American brewers. It brought together majority of anybody African-American that was in the brewing industry. So there was probably a representation of 15 to 20 brewers there that were African-American. And then in the Pittsburgh area, they also had local breweries from that area. So altogether, there probably was 35 to 40 breweries represented as a whole. But what was significant was that it was the first time that we were all together, where we kind of know of each other, but it was the first time we had all met together, which I thought was really special. And so this is the second year. It's a lot larger. A lot more big names are going to be there, which I'm even kind of giddy to meet. I don't know if you know who Garrett Oliver is from Brooklyn Brewing. Brooklyn Brewing. He's kind of like a rock star in the brewing industry. So I'm really, really kind of excited to meet him. And so he's going to be like a keynote speaker there. So it should be a really, really great festival. And it should be a great time.
Do you know what his favorite hop is?
Oh, I do not.
I forgot it too.
I do not.
I know it's like really not a hop that anyone else, but like I know like he talks about that one hop a lot.
I would say mine is Cascade.
Oh, nice, old school.
Yeah, I probably 50% of maybe 40 to 50% of my beers maybe have some type of Cascade in it.
Cool.
I love Cascade.
Yeah. Nice. All right. I think we're just going to open up to the audience, if that's okay with you all. Is there anything you want to add, Chris, before we take questions from the audience, that you want to add anything to what we said?
Thank you for having me. I really
great.
appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're going to have the audience yell out your questions. And so it's this mic is not going to make it.
I'll start it out or something.
Yeah. You mentioned
you.
a mentor.
Yes.
And could you talk about who he or she, I guess, were, and what they did to help you learn?
Okay, so again, my mentor was from SCORE. And what he did was he kind of grounded me on things that I should look for that I wouldn't have thought that I needed to look for. One thing was knowing your business, know your numbers, know who your target market is. So it's just little things that where in my mind I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to brew beer and sell beer. Where it's more, it's way more than just that. And so he kind of grounded me on things that I need to do, things I need to look for, and things that I wouldn't have thought of that that he pointed out to me that I should be looking for.
My question is related to maybe the pressures of the bigger brewers like InBev. I'm a brewer. I've been brewing for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's talk amongst craft brewers and home brewers alike about the pressure of entities like InBev,
Okay.
who are taking control of a lot of
Little guys.
buying little guys up, maybe having some control on ingredients. I'm not saying they are, but I don't know if Kevin's felt it or if you have felt it. Just wondered if you had felt any of that pressure.
I haven't.
Or did they come to you and offer
No,
you money?
no, they haven't came to me. I believe I'm small enough to where I'm probably one of the ones that really just flies under their radar, and I haven't felt any pressures. But along the lines of what you were saying, as far as ingredients, I have read where InBev was, as far as hops, taking over hop farms, where hops weren't going to be readily available to a lot of brewers. I know they're trying to choke the little guys out, but I know for sure that craft brewery as a whole, and with all of us banding together, they don't stand a chance. So I guess I don't think I'm really worried about InBev. They're just worried about their market shares that they're losing to us. Yes, ma'am.
I'm design oriented, and I love your logo. I want to know the process you went through, and is it like the first logo and name, or did you go through the process?
Okay. I'm gonna answer that. I'm gonna say something to him first. Thank you for not asking me about that.
The logo?
Yeah, the logo. Thank you. I tell that story a lot also. Okay, so nobody here is probably familiar, or you may be familiar. Are anybody familiar with Toledo?
Yeah.
Toledo. So do you know?
I played for West Michigan University, so yeah.
So do you know Toledo is another name for Toledo is Frogtown? Okay. So another name for Toledo is Frogtown. So we're the glass capital of Frogtown. And I was born and raised in Toledo. So in my process of trying to come up with a name, his was easy, I guess. It's your last name. It's your last name. So with me trying to come up with something clever for the brewery, I was like, oh my God. Anybody that knows me, I'm a big geek. I love Star Wars, Star Trek, anything sci-fi. I'm big on. So I'm of course I'm trying to think of something that's kind of sci-fi related because I'm just a big geek like that. But I couldn't come up with anything. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm from Toledo. Toledo is Frogtown. I'm African American. So it just kind of like clicked, and I'm like, okay, I'm African American. I'm from Toledo. So I just kind of just put the two together, Black Frog Brewery, and that's how I came.
That's cool.
That was it.
Did you design it?
Yes and no. So I don't even think I have a picture of the original. So the original one, I tried to come up. So everything on here, the concept was the same. So in my original design that I made, I had the frog. And so these aren't, a lot of people think they're flies, but they're actually bees. And so that's another thing about Black Frog Brewery is that every beer that is made has a little bit of honey malt in it. It was, when I was learning to brew, it was just a malt that I fell in love with. I fell in love with honey malt. And so I told myself, you know what? Every beer I make, I'm putting some type of honey malt in. Nice. And so that's what the bees represent, is that because I put honey malt in every beer that I make. And so in the original sign, I had the bees, I had the frog, and I had the leaves on there. And so of course it wasn't as cleaned up as this. And so I went to a company online. I said, hey, this is the basic design of what I want. I probably went through maybe 10 or 15 iterations of this. And this was the final design that they came up with, which I thought turned out really, really well.
That's very cool.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thinking back to when you were working out of your garage, your small-scale
So I don't know. Kevin may can adjust. So I would like to think every brewery goes through some type of quality control, and I can say that there's been batches that if they don't taste right, I'm dumping them down the drain. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's like, but for me, you have to have that consistency. And I want to thank my wife for that, because that was, I want to thank my wife because you have to have that consistency. And so whenever I taste the beer and it doesn't taste the way it's supposed to taste, unfortunately, I'm dumping it, because I don't want someone coming into the brewery and say, okay, well, Flying Frog tasted like this one week, and then I came in 2 weeks later and it tastes like this. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not good. And so in the garage, I really didn't have, I hate to say I didn't have that much problem. I had problems, but because I was doing it on such a smaller scale, it was easier for me to control the environment that the beer was in. Mm-hmm. So I was able to control the consistency of that beer until I got it into packaging.
And were you on a 20-gallon Blickman?
I was on a 20-gallon Blickman, yes.
Is that what you were on too when you started here?
50-gallon.
Oh, okay, wow. Cool.
Yeah, I was on a 20-gallon Blickman Brew Easy system. I mean, literally probably stood about this tall, maybe that wide, and that's what I was looking for in the garage, because I needed something with a very small footprint.
Yeah.
I was only working with probably 100 and something square feet, so I needed something that didn't take up a lot of space. Yes, ma'am.
I just wondered if we get to try some of your beer tonight.
No, unfortunately.
We got weird laws.
Yeah, unfortunately. You could always come visit us in Toledo.
It's not that far.
Yeah, it's not that far. You can always come visit us in Toledo. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any doubts? Were you nervous transitioning, or
I still have doubts now.
Too late.
This is gonna sound corny, but I just, in your mind, you like, I think I can. It's like one of those things. It's like, I know I can. It's just like, you just have to tell yourself, what you're doing is good, and you've been good up to this point. Why would you have doubts now? So, yes, ma'am.
When you started out in your garage, did you also have a day job where you were doing both? And then, did you have a background for business or for food?
No. So, a little background about me. I spent 10 years in the Army. Got out the Army. We came back home with our 2 children. Yeah, no problem. We came back home. I started going to college when I got back from the Army. But then I got a job at the Social Security Administration. And so I worked at the Social Security Administration for 16 years. And so just July of last year, so they counted my 10 years from the military plus my 16, which gave me the 26 years I needed. And so they offered early out at the Social Security Administration. And so I took it July of last year. So now brewing is my full-time job. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mr. Hayes, so did you identify any particular type of beer that people enjoy in the Toledo area, or did you just start brewing it
I did not identify any type of specific beer that people in the Toledo area drank. Typically, in the Toledo area, and this is probably nationwide, most people drink IPAs, and so I had a couple of IPAs that I did, but I like drinking IPAs, but probably my favorite styles of beer are pale ale, and imperial stouts, and barrel aged stouts, and it's funny because those actually are the least beers that I brew.
So how do people accept the honey twist?
They like it because it tends to have a more sweeter note in the beers than typical. And that's just me because that's the way my taste bud is I kind of like it a little bit more malty and sweeter than normal. Yes, sir.
How many other breweries are there around Toledo?
Less than 10. I was just telling somebody today that per capita we're really far behind. I would think Kalamazoo probably has twice as many breweries as Toledo's, where I know Toledo is bigger than Kalamazoo, but you guys have way more breweries than we do.
But is that, we have some, I'm sorry to answer, we have some friends on the East Coast, like a little bit for like Delaware and Maryland, and just the state laws. Ohio state law is different in a sense, where it may be more restrictive than like Michigan, because Michigan is definitely, I mean, I've been all over the continent, well, that too, but, and the states, and Michigan is definitely the brewery state, period. I mean, so is it just a different laws or different, what makes it? And you're one state away, so like, why the difference?
Okay. So as far as Ohio laws, so back in 2014, the governor changed the law. So initially in Ohio, the brewer's license, it was called an A1, and what that did was it allowed you to brew beer, but along with you could brew beer, you could self-distribute, you could sell on premises, but it also allowed you to sell wine, liquor. You with that license you could do everything with it, and that was almost $5,000 for that license. But in 2014, the governor changed it, and I'm glad because he had the foresight because of craft beer. He created what was called an A1C. So, and that's the license that I have. So with the A1C, it allows you to brew beer up to 31 million gallons, which it's a lot of beer. It's a lot of beer. And it still kept the same things to where you could self-distribute, you could sell on premises, and you could brew beer with that license. But you didn't get everything else with it, like selling liquor, selling wine, and all that other stuff. So from that $5,000, it went to $1,000, which opened it up to a lot of breweries. So that's why Ohio is probably starting to get more breweries now, because of that rule back in 2014 that allowed for $1,000. You could do all of that.
And if you don't mind, Michigan, on the other hand, is when we first opened in 2013, you got a brewer's license for $1,000, and all we could sell here still is anything we produce that's at least 50% malted barley, so it has to be a beer. Okay. We couldn't even self-distribute at all when we first opened. Wow. They changed that law probably 2014. I think we've been open about a year. Yep. If you produce less than 1,000 barrels a year in Michigan now you can self-distribute. But there was none of the other. We have to get it. If we want to do wine or cider, we have to get a
we have to have a separate
license. That's another. I think it's like $1,000 also.
Yeah.
And there's the other paperwork that goes along with
Yeah.
that.
But the laws were a little bit more. There's a lot of breweries in
Oh, there are, but I would say their law is much more.
Yeah, the new law is,
The
yeah.
new law is more. Way
Yeah.
more
Good for
open to
Ohio, I mean,
open a brewery.
Yeah.
Good for you guys.
Craft
Yeah.
beer is really where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you want to do, like you said, with beer and wine, we just can't buy a separate license. Then you have to move up to that A1, that $5,000 license to do the beer, the wine, the alcohol. It's just
You
not.
can do alcohol with that.
Yeah, with the
Now,
A1.
see, in Michigan, you either have to get a small distiller's license where you would have to make it yourself or bond it in,
No.
or you could have to get a brew pub license. Is the only way that a brewery could sell. As far as I understand, the only way a brewery could sell liquor is to have a brew pub license, and that's basically like a regular liquor license where it's going to cost you $25,000 to $50,000.
Oh my God.
And you have to prove that 70% of your sales come from food. So,
Wow.
yeah, they are. I mean, Michigan has a lot of breweries, but they also still have a lot of restrictive laws.
Yeah,
Those
no.
laws are restrictive a lot of times from the distributors, who are the big middlemen between big breweries and your small store, and they put a lot of money in the political system to keep things in their favor.
That's probably why that's probably why they don't like us, because we can do all the self-distribute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Are you still the brewer, or have you expanded to the point where you have other people you trust to brew your brews?
It is me. it is just me. I'm there on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'm there brewing. Yes, ma'am.
And how much did you brew last year? Or what about what you brewed this year or whatever?
Last year my numbers were. Oh my God.
Trick question.
I know. I'm trying to. I just filled out the paperwork too at the beginning of the year.
Less than $1 million?
Yes. I want to say it was close to 350 barrels.
That's pretty
Oh,
good.
that's wow.
Great.
Fair.
Oh,
Are you still canning as well and still selling out of the store, or are you just solely the brewery at this point?
I can tell you, I hate bottling.
Don't we?
I did it because I had to, but I think I would never ever go back to bottling my own. I do can, but it's cans to go. I don't do any cans for distribution or anything like that. So if somebody comes in and they want a can to go, then we'll can it up right there and send them on their way.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Harris.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in, man.
Thank
I want to thank the KPL as well as Tibbs for allowing this to happen. To kind of go into the question you asked earlier, as an educator, I do believe that whether you want the pressure or not, it's awesome to see an African American brewer and to hear your story, because I do believe some of that answer to that question you asked earlier, is it Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Is just seeing it.
Right.
It's just seeing it, and so it's inspirational. So I just want to say
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have you been able to foster any homebrew clubs or anything in the African American community?
So there really isn't any African American homebrew clubs. I do belong to a homebrew club, or a couple of them in the Toledo area, but there aren't any African American brew clubs. No, at least not that I know of. Yes, sir.
So is there any particular brew that you made that you consider either particularly problematic or just one that has been a real stretch for you?
Yes. Two of them that comes to mind. I did a New England. And
I'm sorry, that's my problem one too.
Touchy.
I have two New Englands that I do. The one New England I have no problems with, but this one New England, and I know what the problem is, and I need to adjust the recipe some. But it's like every time I brew it, I get a stuck sparge. It just drives me nuts. And then the second beer I did was there was a local hop farm, or I guess it's a hop farm. They test hops out, and so she had bought me some hop leaves to use in a beer because she wanted to see what it was like, and so I told her I would make a beer with them. And I'm really not a fan of hop leaves, and so that beer was a little challenging to make. Because usually I put them in a emulsion sack because I don't want to get the hop leaves stuck in my drain, and it's just, that was just a problem beer to make. And when I made it, it was such a hit in the brewery, and then everybody's asking me to make the beer again, and it's like, so those are my two problem children. Yes, ma'am.
Around here, every once in a while, we find people are doing beers that we consider a bit strange and might not be good taste combinations. You know, your oyster mint peach combination.
No.
Have you ever done anything like that?
Thank you.
No. No. No, that's a little too wild for me. No, no.
But if you do want to taste something wild, Bright Eyes is doing a beer for this Overdue Brew program, a blonde ale aged on Skittles.
Actually, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Wow. That actually sounds
that
really
might
good.
be all right,
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Reading Rainbow.
That actually sounds really good. And when is that ready?
Is that ready right now? Do you know?
Yeah, they have it.
So there you go. Bright Eyes.
He's way more well prepared than me. My library beer is not available.
This is Kalamazoo. He's got our original Overdue Brew, and then we also have another one over at One Well. It's a double IPA called Literary Liquid. That one's really good as well. So bring that library card, show it, get $1 off beer.
Yeah.
Cool.
That sounds really good. On Skittles.
On Skittles.
That
Yeah.
sounds really good. Yes, sir.
I see on your website that you don't have any Gosa or sours. Is that just not a beer that you like?
I don't like sour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know, like. But you know, even if I did like sours, that's a whole nother thing. It's like when you see a brewery do sours, that's all they do is sours. It's like no, I don't think so.
I think we're good.
I never heard of Frogtown. Why is it called that?
Okay, so Toledo used to be kind of like swampland. And so there's a road in Toledo called the Anthony Wayne Trail. But that Anthony Wayne Trail used to be nothing but swamp. And of course with swamps, it's, a lot of frogs. And so probably, maybe 20 years ago, if you went to downtown Toledo, there was a exhibition to where they had where artists did different like frogs that probably stood about this tall. And they were like stationed like on different corners in downtown Toledo. It must have been some type of anniversary for Toledo being Frog Town. But yeah, Toledo used to be kind of like swampland. And so there was tons of frogs, and that's how we got the name Frog Town.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I want to really thank everyone who came to this event. It was really fun. Especially special thanks to you, Chris Harris.
Thank you for having me.
It was a lot of good fun. And
We did the drawing.
oh, drawing. Sweet.
Thanks, Chris.
No, thank you so much.